Hello. If there's anyone watching this that I haven't met, my name's Chloe, and Becky asked me to share this weekend with you all because she knows how much I love the verses in Mark that we have gotten to. So I'm really excited to share with you. We're going to be talking about Mark 5:21 through 40, through 43. And these verses have been really significant in my life, and I'm very excited to share why. So, to start, I'll say that the first real experience I had with these stories, besides reading them on my own or hearing them shared to me, was at a Young Life camp about 5 or 6 years ago when I was leading a group of about 6 sophomore girls. None of these kids knew each other, and they all had really, really heavy, hard things happening in their lives. So it was already kind of a hard setting walking into the weekend, putting teenagers together that didn't know each other and felt nervous about it, and also were carrying hard things. But they all were really invested in coming and hearing more about who Jesus is. They didn't know very much. Not a lot of them had had any church experiences or experiences with Jesus before that they could articulate, and so it was a really special time to get to share with them. So throughout that weekend, the camp speaker talked about these 20 verses. And the first night, this is what they heard. We're going to start with Mark 5:21. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people following crowded around him. Great. So Jairus is this powerful man. As a leader of the synagogue, he would have not only been popular, but socially and otherwise powerful in his community. Also, kind of revered. People would have respected this man. So at the start, when you look at this, if we're looking at it as Mark trying to paint the picture of Jesus, this powerful Christ in the gospel, then we see a win for Mark. He's really doing it here. He's setting the stage as this powerful man is going to Jesus to ask for healing, and Jesus says yes. He says, "Yes, I will go heal your daughter Jairus." When my girls at camp heard this story on the first night, they were so bored. They didn't connect. Yes, Jairus had something hard, but what they heard was that Jesus was just going with them, was going to go heal his daughter, and it was going to be easy. And it wasn't really until this next part of the story that we had a really big connection with what was going on in the gospel. So let me keep going, and let's see what happens next. So it continues after Jesus agrees to go with Jairus, and they're going to walk down miles and miles to Jairus' house to heal his dying daughter. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she'd gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed." Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There is no use in troubling the teacher now." So this is what my kids and I heard on the second night of that Young Life camp. And we talked about a lot of things, but I remember the most important thing that we shared in our little cabin discussion that night was the question of, who do you identify with? Do you identify with Jairus? Do you identify with this woman that was bleeding and suffering and has been healed? We talked about similarities. Both have suffering in their life, great suffering. The idea of losing your 12-year-old daughter, I can't fathom what that feels like. And also the idea of being in pain and suffering and losing your money and losing your credibility in town because of your suffering for 12 years. They both sound horrible. And yet, one of them gets a promise from Jesus that he's going to heal. And that promise seems to be let down as Jesus gets distracted by this bleeding woman. I really love what other translations say when Jesus is listening to the woman, and it says, he stopped and heard her whole story. And that is 12 years of suffering. I currently have this very frustrating back issue, and I've seen like 5 doctors, and it's been a couple years, and it's just been a whole thing. And I could talk about that for an hour, and it's been 2 years. So I can't imagine how long this story is that she is telling Jesus as he is listening to her, and she has already been healed. The power went out from him and onto her, and immediately her bleeding stopped. And I can't imagine what Jairus is thinking as he's standing with the crowd, waiting for Jesus to rush to his house to save his dying daughter. He probably felt abandoned. He probably felt let down. And he probably felt like he got his hopes up and he's being disappointed. When I ask this question to my Young Life kids, the question of, who do you identify with? Jairus, somebody that God said he was going to be with him and then he let him down? Seemed to get distracted by other people, seemed to prioritize somebody or something else over you? Or this woman who finally got what she needed and God came through and Jesus was there for her and she got the healing that she's been asking for years. And every single kid in the room said, oh, I feel like Jairus. I feel exactly like Jairus. I thought God was with me and then this happened. I thought God was with me and then my sister died. I thought God was with me and then I got sick. I thought God was with me and then my parents got a divorce. Whatever it was, they had felt let down. And the thing that I think is most important about this story is that it is not the end of the story. And none of them knew what the end of the story was. So let's read it together. It says, Jesus overheard them, the people that said, your daughter is dead, don't bother this teacher anymore. Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep. The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened, and then he told them to get her something to eat. When my students heard this story, they were shocked, and they didn't realize that that Jairus' pain wasn't the end of the story. That Jesus had not, in fact, walked away from Jairus to prioritize somebody else, but perhaps he had walked away from Jairus to heal somebody else and to give Jairus an even better ending of the story. That doesn't take away from the fact that Jairus experienced incredible pain because of this situation, because Jesus essentially let his daughter die. But instead of having the story end there, Jesus brought real life and real resurrection into Jairus' home. That's better than just a healing. That's better than him just choosing this daughter. Jesus healed both, this daughter and this woman. And there's so much to say about it. And I really don't think that I want to belabor all the nuances of this story that I couldn't even think of all of them if I tried. But the thing that sticks out to me the most about the combination of stories here and the way that my kids reacted is that it's a call to action. It's a call to action because when Jesus says to the girl, little girl, get up and walk. And she does. And when I hear that, I think, okay, I am a part of resurrection. If I put myself in this little girl's shoes and hear those words over me, Jesus is saying, here's new life, get up and go do something about it. And that has all kinds of action steps and all kinds of responses to how do we bring resurrection into our current life? How do we bring the kingdom closer? But the other action step, the other call to action I see in this story is to remember the end of our story. To remember that this story didn't end with Jesus letting a 12-year-old girl die to choose somebody else. When my students at camp heard this on the last night, it kind of broke something open in them and in me. That they didn't know that Jesus went to raise this girl from the dead. They didn't know that. And what they heard was that Jesus is still with me and might have something even better written at the end of my story. He might really be inviting them and me and you to be a part of resurrection. And there are a lot of ways that I need to remember the end of the story, or trust that there is an end of the story that doesn't end with death and suffering in my circumstances. And I don't know what that is for you, but I know for me that when I get into a place, and this year has been a great example, or 100 great examples of what it feels like to feel like the story ends too soon, that it is not over. And Jesus is with me, and he is actually writing a better ending to the story than I know of. But that doesn't mean I will not experience great suffering or pain. That the injustice is not just as painful or just as real as it would be without the resurrection. There's nothing right about a 12-year-old girl dying too soon. But there is everything new and good and Jesus-like in the resurrection. So my question to you is, can you live like this girl? Can you get up and walk? Can you bring resurrection into your steps, into your next steps? But also, what is the end of the story that you need to remember? And where can you hold on to the truth, like my sweet high school girls learned to with me, that this isn't the end and that there might be more? I feel like the best thing I can do when I need to know what the end of the story is simply to ask. And so there are certain circumstances in my life now that feel hard and feel unfinished, and my response has been to just ask, okay, Jesus, what is the end of this story then? And I don't really have an answer right now, but my prayer and my hope and the thing I hold on to is that there is one. Because I have not been left behind or chosen, somebody else was not chosen over me to experience God's healing. You've been chosen and I have been chosen, and Jesus is committed to stick with us and bring us into resurrection and into the end of the story. Thanks for listening, and I love these verses, and if there's something that you want to chat about with them later, I would love a call this week. And so I'm praying for you and for this community, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.